"Grandma, why don't you call the police?" my granddaughter Sarah asked, looking up from her phone with concern in her eyes. I smiled at her sweet face, still round with youth despite her being 23. "Because, sweetheart, sometimes you have to deliver justice yourself," I replied, opening my laptop. I began planning exactly how I would teach this scammer a lesson. This 78-year-old grandma was about to become the biggest mistake of his life. It all started 3 weeks ago with a phone call. I was kneading dough for my famous apple pie when the phone rang. The caller ID showed an unfamiliar number, but I answered anyway. "Mrs. Eleanor Wilkins?" a professional-sounding man asked. "Yes, speaking," I replied, wiping flour from my hands. "This is Michael Stevens from Social Security Administration. I'm calling because we've detected suspicious activity on your account. Someone is trying to use your Social Security number for illegal transactions." My heart skipped a beat. At my age, your Social Security is your lifeline. I'd worked as a high school English teacher for 42 years before retiring. My husband Frank had passed away 5 years ago, and I was managing just fine on my own, thank you very much. But the thought of someone messing with my benefits sent a cold shiver down my spine. "What kind of suspicious activity?" I asked, my voice slightly shaky. "Ma'am, someone has been using your Social Security number to open credit accounts in Texas. They've already accumulated over $20,000 in debt. We need to secure your funds immediately." He sounded so official, so concerned, but something didn't feel right. Frank had always told me to be cautious with strangers asking about money. "Trust your gut, Allie," he'd say, and my gut was sending warning signals. "I'd like to verify that you're actually from the Social Security Administration. What's your employee ID number?" There was a slight pause before he smoothly replied, "SSA 24875, ma'am. Now we need to act quickly to protect your assets." I wrote down the number he gave me. "I'll call the official Social Security office to confirm this," I said. His tone changed immediately. "Ma'am, there's no time. Your accounts could be drained within hours. I'm trying to help you." That's when I knew for certain he was a fraud. But instead of hanging up, a strange thought crossed my mind. What if I played along, just enough to gather information? "I'm sorry," I said, softening my voice to sound more frail and confused. "I'm just an old lady, and these things frighten me. Please tell me what I need to do." His voice warmed again, thinking he had me. "I understand, Mrs. Wilkins. First, we need to secure your funds by transferring them to a protected government account temporarily." For the next 20 minutes, he explained his elaborate scheme, and I pretended to believe every word, occasionally asking confused questions to sound like the vulnerable elderly woman he thought I was. When I finally hung up, I immediately called the real Social Security office to report the scam. The representative thanked me for reporting it, but said there wasn't much they could do without more information. "These scammers are usually operating from overseas," she explained. "We advise you to simply hang up next time." But something in me couldn't let it go. This man was targeting seniors like me, people who might be truly vulnerable, frightened, and alone. How many had already fallen for his scheme? That evening, when Sarah came for our weekly dinner, I told her about the call. "Grandma, these scammers are everywhere," she said with a sigh. "One called Grandpa Joe last month, pretending to be me, saying I was in jail and needed bail money." "Did he believe it?" "Almost," she said. "But then they got greedy and asked for too much. Grandpa got suspicious and called Mom to check on me." As Sarah spoke, I remembered how, in my 42 years of teaching, I dealt with my fair share of troublemakers and liars. I developed a knack for seeing through deception and turning situations around. The scammer had promised to call back tomorrow to complete the security process. He thought he'd found an easy target. Little did he know, I was about to turn the cables on him. What he didn't realize was that before I became the sweet grandma who baked apple pies, I was Mrs. Wilkins, the English teacher who could make even the toughest teenagers confess to cheating on their essays with just one raised eyebrow. And just like those students, this scammer was about to learn a valuable lesson. The next morning, I sat by my phone, notepad ready, waiting for his call. Sarah had stayed overnight, worried about me, but I assured her I knew what I was doing. "Grandma, what exactly are you planning?" she asked over breakfast. I'm going to gather evidence, I replied, pouring her more orange juice, enough to make the police take this seriously. She looked doubtful. The police already told you there's not much they can do. That's because they think I'm just a confused old lady who can't remember details, I said. But they'll change their tune when I have proof. At precisely 10:15 a.m., the phone rang. Michael Stevens was calling again. "Hello, Mrs. Wilkins," came the same professional voice. "Are you ready to secure your accounts today?" "Yes, Mr. Stevens," I answered, winking at Sarah. "I'm just a bit nervous about all this." "That's completely understandable," he said smoothly. "I'll guide you through every step." He began by asking for my banking information. I gave him fake account numbers I'd prepared. "I'm showing those accounts are inactive, Mrs. Wilkins," he said after a moment. "Are you sure these are correct?" "Oh, dear," I feigned confusion. "Those must be the accounts Frank handled before he passed. Let me find my current statements." I pretended to shuffle papers while Sarah watched, wide-eyed. I was buying time, keeping him on the line while Sarah used her phone to record our conversation. "Mr. Stevens, while I'm looking, could you explain again how you'll protect my money? My memory isn't what it used to be." He launched into another detailed explanation of his security protocol, not realizing he was digging himself deeper with every word. "Found them," I announced eventually. "But, Mr. Stevens, I'm wondering, wouldn't it be easier if I just went to my local Social Security office instead?" His voice tensed. "No, Mrs. Wilkins, your case requires special handling. Going to the local office would actually alert the criminals that we're on to them." "That makes sense. One more question. You mentioned a protection fee yesterday. How much was that again?" "It's a refundable security deposit of $1,500. It's returned to you once your new accounts are established." Sarah's eyes widened at the amount. I nodded calmly. "I think I'll need to withdraw that from my bank. Can I call you back after I visit my branch?" He hesitated. "It would be better if I stayed on the line while you go to the bank. These criminals might be monitoring your movements." "Oh my," I gasped dramatically. "You think they're watching me?" "It's possible, Mrs. Wilkins. These are sophisticated operations." I covered the phone and whispered to Sarah, who was already reaching for her keys. "This is working better than I thought." After convincing Mr. Stevens that I needed to get dressed before going to the bank, I arranged to call him back in an hour. When I hung up, Sarah looked at me with a mixture of amazement and concern. "Grandma, you were incredible, but this is getting serious. He wants actual money now." And that's exactly what we need. Now he's committing a clear crime, requesting funds under false pretenses. But don't worry, I'm not giving him a penny. We drove to the local police station with our recording. The officer at the front desk was the same one who had dismissed my concerns earlier. "Officer Parker, remember me? The confused old lady with the scammer story?" He had the decency to look embarrassed. "Mrs. Wilkins, what can I do for you today?" "You can listen to this," I said, as Sarah played the recording. His expression changed as he heard the scammer, clearly asking for money. When the recording finished, he looked at me with new respect. "Mrs. Wilkins, this is excellent evidence. But I have to warn you, engaging further with this scammer could be dangerous." I smiled at him. "Officer Parker, I taught high school English for 42 years. I've faced down gangs of teenagers trying to convince me their dog ate their homework. This scammer doesn't scare me." He couldn't help but smile back at me. "Let me get Detective Collins. She handles these cases."
Detective Collins was a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s who listened to our recording with intense focus. "You've done good work, Mrs. Wilkins, but I agree with Officer Parker. You should disengage now. We'll take it from here." But I had other ideas. As we left the station, I turned to Sarah and said, "They're still not taking this seriously enough. They think they'll trace the call and find nothing, just like all the other times." "So what are you going to do?" Sarah asked. I smiled. "I'm going to become the worst nightmare of every scammer out there, an English teacher with time on her hands and a score to settle." What none of them realized was that I was just getting started. The real lesson was yet to begin.
Back at home, I called Mr. Stevens as promised. Sarah had reluctantly left for work, making me swear I wouldn't actually give him any real information or money. "Mrs. Wilkins," he answered immediately. "Did you secure the funds?" "I did," I said. "But something strange happened at the bank. The teller asked a lot of questions when I mentioned the Social Security Administration." "That's concerning," he replied, a new edge in his voice. "What exactly did you tell them?" "Just that I needed to withdraw money for a security deposit with the Social Security office. She said they'd never heard of such a thing." He paused, likely calculating his next move. "Mrs. Wilkins, bank employees aren't always informed about special security protocols. Did you withdraw the money?" "Yes, I have it right here," I lied. "But I'm feeling uneasy. The teller gave me a pamphlet about scams targeting seniors." "Mrs. Wilkins," his voice became stern, "this is exactly how the criminals operate. They plant doubt. They turn trusted institutions against you. This is why we needed to act quickly." I pretended to sniffle, as if on the verge of tears. "I don't know what to think anymore." "Listen to me," he softened his tone. "I've been with the Social Security Administration for 15 years. My only concern is protecting you. Now, for your security, we need to proceed with the protection protocol." "How do I do that?" I asked meekly. "You'll need to convert that cash into Bitcoin. It's the only secure way to transfer the security deposit." I almost laughed out loud. Bitcoin, of course. But I maintained my confused, elderly persona. "Bitcoin? What's that? Is it like a check?" He spent the next 20 minutes explaining cryptocurrency to me while I pretended to be overwhelmed by the technology. I asked him to repeat things, claimed I was writing everything down but couldn't keep up, and generally made myself the most frustrating potential victim possible. "There's a Bitcoin ATM at the convenience store on Maple Street. Do you know where that is?" "Oh, yes, near the library. My late husband used to buy lottery tickets there every Tuesday. He never won more than $20, but he enjoyed the dream of winning. He would say, 'Ellie, someday we'll go to Paris.' But we never did. After he retired from the post office, his knees got bad, and then there was the matter of his heart condition." "Mrs. Wilkins, about the Bitcoin ATM." "Yes, sorry, my mind wanders these days. So I go to this machine and do what exactly?" He explained the process again, his professional facade slipping further with each repetition. "And then I send it to what address again?" I asked for the third time. "I'll text it to you," he said. "Can you receive text messages?" "Oh, yes. My granddaughter showed me how. Such a clever girl. She works in computers, you know. Something about programming. I don't understand it myself, but she's always trying to teach me about internet safety." "Mrs. Wilkins," he cut in sharply, then caught himself. "I'll send the address now. Please go to the Bitcoin ATM as soon as possible." After hanging up, I smiled to myself. I'd learned several things. He was getting frustrated, he was using Bitcoin to avoid detection, and most importantly, he would be texting me from his phone number. My old flip phone buzzed with his text message, a Bitcoin wallet address, and instructions.
Exactly what Detective Collins needed. I called her immediately. Detective, I have his Bitcoin information and phone number. Mrs. Wilkins, she sounded surprised. I thought we agreed you'd stop engaging with him. I don't recall agreeing to that. I recall you suggesting it. She sighed. This could be valuable information, but I still don't want you continuing this interaction. It's too risky. With all due respect, Detective, I've already established rapport. If you scare him off now, he'll just move on to the next vulnerable senior. There was a long pause. What exactly are you proposing? Let me be your inside person. I'll keep him on the hook while you trace his operation. Mrs. Wilkins, this isn't a television show. We don't use civilian inside persons. Maybe you should start, because I've gotten further with this scammer in 2 days than you have in... How many similar cases have crossed your desk this year? Another pause. We have protocols, Mrs. Wilkins. And how well are those protocols working for the seniors in this community who are losing their life savings? I challenged. I could almost hear her internal debate. Finally, she said, I can't officially sanction this, but keep me informed and, Mrs. Wilkins, be extremely careful. I hung up feeling vindicated. The police were finally taking this seriously, even if reluctantly. But I knew they still didn't fully believe I could handle this situation. What they didn't understand was that I wasn't just doing this for myself. I was doing it for Frank, who would have been outraged at someone trying to take advantage of me. I was doing it for my former students, many of whom were now seniors themselves. And I was doing it for every elderly person who had been dismissed, underestimated, or taken advantage of. Mr. Stevens had no idea what was coming. This wasn't just about catching a scammer anymore. This was about proving that age doesn't define capability. And I was about to teach that lesson in spectacular fashion.
The next morning, I called Sarah to update her on my plan. She was still concerned, but knew better than to try to talk me out of it. Just promise me you'll get careful, Grandma, she said, and keep me updated. I will, dear, I assured her. Now, I need your help with something technical. Sarah helped me set up a recording app on my phone that would automatically save any calls with Mr. Stevens. She also showed me how to back up the text messages he sent. Grandma, you're like a senior citizen spy, she said with a mixture of admiration and worry. I laughed. More like a detective. Your grandfather always said I missed my calling. I should have been a private investigator instead of an English teacher. After Sarah left, I called Mr. Stevens again. Mrs. Wilkins, he answered, impatience evident in his voice. Did you visit the Bitcoin ATM? I tried, but it was so confusing. All those buttons and codes. A young man offered to help, but I didn't think I should tell a stranger about our security protocol. That was wise, he said, but Mrs. Wilkins, time is running out. Your accounts remain vulnerable. I understand, I replied. That's why I've been thinking. What if I just wire the money directly to the Social Security Administration? Wouldn't that be simpler? He paused, likely recognizing the trap. That's not possible due to the encryption requirements. Bitcoin is the only secure method for the protection protocol. I see, I said. Well, then perhaps my son could help me with the Bitcoin machine. He's very good with technology. No, he said quickly. Mrs. Wilkins, this is a confidential security operation. Involving family members could compromise the entire process and put your funds at greater risk. Really? That seems strange. I trust my son completely. It's not about trust, he explained, his tone softening into something almost patronizing. It's about security protocols. Each person involved creates a potential leak.
I suppose that makes sense, I conceded. So, what do you suggest? I can guide you through the process step by step over the phone. When can you go back to the Bitcoin ATM? I could go this afternoon, but I have another question first. How will I know when my social security number is secure again? You'll receive an official letter from our office within 5 to 7 business days confirming the security measures. Now, about the Bitcoin transfer. A letter with your official letterhead and employee ID number, correct? Yes, of course, he confirmed. And will you be signing this letter, Mr. Stevens? Yes, it will have my electronic signature. I smiled to myself. He was digging his hole deeper with every lie. One more thing, I said. The teller at my bank suggested I ask for your supervisor's contact information, just for my peace of mind. There was a longer pause this time. Mrs. Wilkins, I understand your caution, but as I explained, this is a special security protocol. Involving more people creates vulnerability. However, if you insist, I can have my supervisor call you tomorrow. That would be wonderful, I said. What's his name? Her name, he corrected. Director Margaret Collins. I almost laughed at his choice of name, borrowing Collins from a detective he didn't know existed. It confirmed my suspicion that he was making everything up on the spot. Perfect, I said. I look forward to speaking with Director Collins. Now, about that Bitcoin machine. We arranged for me to go to the Bitcoin ATM at 3 p.m. with him on the phone to guide me through the process. Of course, I had no intention of actually sending any money. After hanging up, I called Detective Collins immediately. He's getting nervous, I told her, and he's created a fictional supervisor using your last name. That's quite a coincidence, she said. Mrs. Wilkins, we've been analyzing the information you've provided. The phone number traces back to a VoIP service, but the Bitcoin wallet might give us more to work with. He wants me to make the transfer today at 3 p.m. She said firmly, "Don't go alone. In fact, don't go at all. We can take it from here." With all due respect, Detective, I said, if I don't show up, he'll know something's wrong. He'll disappear and target someone else. She sighed. Mrs. Wilkins, you're putting me in a difficult position. I'm putting this scammer in a difficult position. And isn't that what we both want? After some negotiation, we reached a compromise. I would go to the Bitcoin ATM, but an undercover officer would be there as a store employee. I would pretend to have trouble with the machine, and the officer would intervene, saying it was out of order. As I hung up, I felt a surge of satisfaction. The police were now actively involved, and Mr. Stevens was about to face his first real obstacle. What he didn't know was that his carefully constructed scam was beginning to unravel, all because he made the mistake of targeting a 78-year-old English teacher with too much time on his hands and a lifetime of experience spotting liars. The hunter was about to become the hunted.
At 2:45 p.m., I arrived at the convenience store on Maple Street. Detective Collins had texted me earlier to confirm that Officer Ramirez would be posing as a store clerk. I spotted him immediately, a young man in his 30s wearing the store's red vest, arranging snacks near the Bitcoin ATM. At precisely 3 p.m., my phone rang. "Mrs. Wilkins?" came the now familiar voice. "Are you at the location?" "Yes, I just arrived," I said, making my voice sound slightly breathless as if I'd hurried. "I see the machine in the corner." "Good. Now approach it and press the start button on the screen." I walked over to the Bitcoin ATM, aware of Officer Ramirez watching discreetly. I pressed the button as instructed. Now it's asking for my phone number, I narrated. Enter your number, he directed. I deliberately entered one digit incorrectly, then said, "Oh dear, I think I made a mistake." "Just press the back button and try again," he said, his impatience barely concealed. I accidentally made another error. "I'm sorry, my fingers aren't as nimble as they used to be." After my third accidental error, he sighed audibly. "Mrs. Wilkins, perhaps you could ask someone there to help you. There's a young man working here. Let me ask him." I gestured to Officer Ramirez, who came over immediately. "Excuse me, young man," I said loudly enough for Mr. Stevens to hear. "Could you help me with this machine? I'm trying to send money to the Social Security Administration." Officer Ramirez played his part perfectly. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but this machine is actually out of order. We've been having problems with it all day." "Did you hear that, Mr. Stevens? The machine isn't working." There was a pause before he responded. "That's unfortunate. Is there another Bitcoin ATM nearby?" Officer Ramirez shook his head at me. "The nearest one is downtown, about 20 minutes away." I relayed this information to Mr. Stevens, who seemed to be calculating his next move. "Mrs. Wilkins, this is concerning. Your accounts are at serious risk. You need to secure them today." "I understand. Let me go home and get my wallet. I can come right back." He paused, clearly weighing his options. "Perhaps it would be better if I call you back in 1 hour. Would you be able to return to the store by then?" "Yes, that should be enough time," I assured him. After hanging up, Officer Ramirez approached me. "You handled that extremely well, Mrs. Wilkins." "Thank you. But he's getting desperate. He's moved from Bitcoin to gift cards." "That's actually helpful for us," he explained. "Gift cards are easier to trace than cryptocurrency." Back at the police station, Detective Collins updated me on their progress. "We're building a solid case, Mrs. Wilkins. We've identified several similar scams in neighboring counties with the same methodology." "So what's next?" I asked. "We want to set up a controlled payment. If we can get him to provide instructions for the gift cards, we might be able to trace where that information goes." "He's calling back in an hour. I told him I'd go home for my wallet and return to the store." Detective Collins nodded. "Perfect. Officer Ramirez will remain undercover at the store. We'll provide you with some dummy gift cards. They look real, but have no value. When the scammer calls back, you'll tell him you purchased the cards and are ready to provide the information." "And then what?" I asked. "Then we track where that information goes. These operations typically involve multiple people. The person you're speaking with is likely just the front man." I considered this new information. "So even if we catch Mr. Stevens, there could be others continuing the scam?" "Unfortunately, yes," she admitted. "These are usually organized operations." A new determination filled me. I wasn't just catching one scammer. I was helping to dismantle an entire operation that was preying on vulnerable seniors. "Detective Collins," I said firmly, "I want to help you get all of them." She looked at me with newfound respect. "Mrs. Wilkins, you are all ready." As I left the station with the dummy gift cards, I felt a sense of purpose I hadn't experienced since retiring from teaching. Frank would have been proud. He always said the best revenge was living well and standing up for what's right. And I was about to stand up in a way Mr. Stevens and his cohorts would never forget. An hour later, I was back at the convenience store, sitting in my car in the parking lot with Detective Collins beside me. She had decided to supervise personally with several officers positioned strategically around the area. "Remember," she instructed, "keep him talking as long as possible. The more information he gives, the better chance we have of tracing his operation." My phone rang precisely on schedule. "Mrs. Wilkins," came the voice, "were you able to return to the store?" "Yes, I'm here now," I said. "I have my wallet this time."
Excellent. Please purchase 3 $500 gift cards and call me back when you have them. Actually, I said, I already bought them. The nice young man who helped me earlier suggested I get them right away. There was a brief silence. You have them already. That's good initiative, Mrs. Wilkins. Detective Collins gave me a thumbs up. Now what do I do with them? I asked. You'll need to read me the numbers on the back of each card, he explained. These will be entered into our secure system to create your protection account. I see, I said. But Mr. Stevens, I'm a bit confused about something. Yesterday you said I needed Bitcoin, but today gift cards are acceptable? He barely hesitated. Both methods are secure, Mrs. Wilkins. Gift cards are actually our preferred method, but we offer Bitcoin as an alternative for tech-savvy clients. I see, I said, pretending to accept this explanation. Well, I have the cards right here. Should I read the numbers now? Yes, please, he said, not bothering to hide the eagerness in his voice. I slowly read the numbers from the first dummy card, deliberately mixing up digits so he had to ask me to repeat sections. Detective Collins nodded encouragingly as I dragged out the process. And now the second card, I said, proceeding even more slowly. Mrs. Wilkins, he interrupted, perhaps you could take a photo of the cards and text them to me. It might be easier. Oh, I'm not very good with the camera on this phone. Let me just continue reading them. After I finally finished with all 3 cards, he said, Thank you, Mrs. Wilkins. I'll process these immediately. Please stay on the line. I covered the phone and whispered to Detective Collins, He's processing them now. She nodded and spoke quietly into her radio. After about 2 minutes, Mr. Stevens returned to the line. Mrs. Wilkins, there seems to be a problem with these cards. Are you sure you purchased them today? Yes, just an hour ago, I confirmed. Is something wrong? The system is showing these cards haven't been activated properly. Did the cashier scan them at checkout? Yes, of course. I watched him do it. Mrs. Wilkins, I need you to go back into the store and speak with the manager. Explain that the cards weren't activated correctly. I looked at Detective Collins, who shook her head. Mr. Stevens, I don't understand. The young man was very thorough. He even tested one of the cards to make sure it was working. There was a long pause. Which young man are you referring to? The one who helped me with the Bitcoin machine earlier. He's been so helpful. Another pause, longer this time. Mrs. Wilkins, did you tell this person why you were purchasing these cards? Well, yes, I said innocently. I explained I needed them for the Social Security Protection Protocol, just like you told me. The silence that followed was deafening. I could almost hear the gears turning in his head as he realized something might be wrong. Mrs. Wilkins, he finally said, his voice now cold and businesslike, I believe there's been a misunderstanding. Our protocol requires absolute confidentiality. By discussing this with store employees, you've potentially compromised the security of your accounts. Oh dear, I gasped. I had no idea. What should we do now? I'll need to consult with my supervisor and call you back. Please do not discuss this matter with anyone else in the meantime. The call ended abruptly. Detective Collins was already on her radio. He spooked. Check the traces now. She turned to me. You did perfectly, Mrs. Wilkins. He suspects something's wrong, but he doesn't know exactly what. Will he call back? I asked. Possibly, but with a different approach. More likely, he'll abandon this attempt and move on to another target. So we've lost him. I felt a pang of disappointment. Not necessarily, she replied. We've gathered significant data from this interaction. The fact that he tried to verify the gift cards tells us he's connected to the redemption end of the operation. We drove back to the police station where a tech specialist was analyzing the call data. We've got some interesting information, he reported. The VoIP service he's using bounces through several countries, but there's a pattern in the connection times. He's likely operating from somewhere in the Eastern time zone. That's something, Detective Collins said. What about the gift card verification? That's where it gets interesting, the specialist continued. He accessed a particular website to check the card balances. That site has been associated with several other scam operations. I listened, fascinated by the technical details, but still feeling like we hadn't quite caught our prey. So what happens now? I asked. Detective Collins turned to me. Now we wait. He might contact you again, or he might not. Either way, you've helped us gather valuable intelligence on his operation. I must have looked disappointed because she added, Mrs. Wilkins, you've done more than most professional investigators could have accomplished. You should be proud. I nodded, but as I left the station, I couldn't shake the feeling that our work was unfinished. Mr. Stevens was still out there, likely moving on to his next victim. That evening, as I prepared for bed, I thought about all the other seniors who might fall prey to his smooth talk and convincing lies. The police had their evidence, but would it be enough to stop him? I was about to turn out the light when my phone chimed with a text message from an unknown number, not Mr. Stevens' number. Mrs. Wilkins, we need to speak urgently about your compromised accounts. Call this secure line immediately. They were trying again, with a new approach. Instead of feeling frightened, I felt a surge of determination. They thought I was an easy target, but they were about to learn just how wrong they were. I texted Detective Collins immediately. They're back. New number, same game. Her response came quickly. Don't engage yet. We'll set up additional monitoring first thing tomorrow morning. I set my phone aside and smiled to myself in the darkness. Mr. Stevens and his friends hadn't given up, but neither had I.
The next morning, Detective Collins and her team arrived at my house early. They set up recording equipment and briefed me on how to handle the new contact. This is likely the same operation, but a different person, she explained. They're trying to salvage the scam by approaching you from a new angle. Should I pretend I don't suspect anything? I asked. Yes, she nodded. Act concerned about the text, but not suspicious of them. We want to see where they take this new approach. At precisely 9 a.m., I called the new number. Social Security Administration, Fraud Prevention Unit, answered a woman's voice. This is Director Margaret Collins. I almost laughed at the coincidence. The same fake name Mr. Stevens had mentioned yesterday. The real Detective Collins raised an eyebrow and pointed to herself in amused disbelief. Yes, this is Eleanor Wilkins. I received a text message about my accounts being compromised. That's correct, Mrs. Wilkins. I'm afraid there's been a serious security breach in your case. Are you aware that you were recently contacted by someone claiming to be from our office? Yes, a Mr. Stevens. He was helping me secure my accounts. Mrs. Wilkins, I regret to inform you that the individual who contacted you was not Michael Stevens from our office. He was an impersonator attempting to defraud you. I gasped dramatically. Oh my goodness, how terrible!
Indeed, she continued. Fortunately, our security systems detected this fraudulent activity before any permanent damage was done. However, we now need to implement emergency protection measures for your accounts. Detective Collins gave me a thumbs up. This new scammer was trying to exploit my supposed fear from the first scam to create an even more convincing scenario. What kind of protection measures? I asked, sounding worried. We'll need to establish a secure verification protocol. This will involve creating a temporary secure account where your funds will be protected while we investigate the breach. That sounds similar to what Mr. Stevens suggested, I said cautiously. I understand your concern, she replied smoothly. The difference is that Mr. Stevens was attempting to direct your funds to his personal accounts. Our secure verification protocol uses official government channels. Detective Collins shook her head in amazement at the audacity of this new approach. How do I know you're really from the Social Security Administration? I asked. A very prudent question, Mrs. Wilkins, she commended. You can verify my credentials by calling our main office at the number on your Social Security card and asking for Director Collins, extension 7842. Of course, this was another trick. If I called the real Social Security Administration and asked for Director Collins, they would have no record of her, but the scammers were counting on me calling the number they had texted me instead. I see. And what do I need to do for this secure verification protocol? The process is straightforward. Since the previous security measures were compromised, we'll need to use a different method. Have you heard of security vouchers? No, I don't believe so, I replied. Security vouchers are government-authorized payment methods that can only be processed through official channels. They're available at most major retailers as prepaid Visa or MasterCard gift cards.
Detective Collins wrote on her notepad and held it up. Same scam, different packaging. I nodded subtly. And how many of these security vouchers will I need? Given the extent of the breach, we recommend $2,000 in security vouchers, she said. That's 4 cards of $500 each. Once secured, these funds will be returned to you after the verification process, typically within 5 to 7 business days. That's a lot of money, I said, letting uncertainty creep into my voice. I understand your concern, Mrs. Wilkins, she said sympathetically, but consider this a temporary measure to protect your entire Social Security account, which contains significantly more funds over time. Would you rather risk losing thousands of dollars to protect a few hundred? Her manipulation was so transparent now that I knew what to look for. Play on fear, create urgency, make the victim feel foolish for questioning the reasonable request. I suppose that makes sense, I conceded. So I purchased these cards, and then what? Once you have the cards, call me back at this secure line. I'll provide instructions for activating the protection protocol. And this will definitely keep my account safe? I asked. Absolutely, Mrs. Wilkins. That's our primary concern. After ending the call, Detective Collins immediately began conferring with her team. They're escalating, asking for more money, and creating an even more elaborate story. They must be desperate, I commented. Is this helping your investigation? Tremendously, she confirmed. Each call gives us more data points to track. This second number is already yielding better location information than the first. So what's our next move? I asked. We play along a little further, but instead of gift cards, we'll suggest a different payment method, one that will be easier for us to track. We spent the next hour preparing our counter strategy. I would call Director Collins back and express concern about purchasing gift cards, suggesting instead that I could send a money order or cashier's check, something that would require them to provide an actual destination for the funds. When I called back, Director Collins answered immediately. Mrs. Wilkins, have you secured the vouchers? Not yet, I said. I'm concerned about carrying that much cash to the store. My arthritis is acting up today, and I'm worried about dropping my purse or being targeted by thieves." She made sympathetic noises. "I understand your concern. Perhaps a family member could assist you." "My family all live out of state, but I was wondering, could I use a cashier's check instead? My bank is just around the corner from my house." There was a pause. "Mrs. Wilkins, security vouchers are our preferred method because they can be processed immediately. A cashier's check would delay the protection protocol." "I understand, but it would be much easier for me. Surely the Social Security Administration accepts checks. You are a government agency, after all." Another pause, longer this time. "Let me consult our protocol guidelines." While she pretended to check, Detective Collins gave me an encouraging nod. "Mrs. Wilkins," the scammer finally said, "in exceptional circumstances, we can accept a cashier's check for the security protocol. However, it must be made out to our specialized processing division." "Of course," I said. "What's the name I should put on the check?" "The check should be made payable to SSA Security Protocols, LLC, and mailed to our processing center in Delaware." Detective Collins' eyes widened. This with exactly what they had hoped for, an actual business name and mailing address. "I'll need that address," I said, reaching for a pen. She provided an address in Wilmington, Delaware, which one of the officers immediately began researching on his laptop. "Thank you," I said. "I'll go to my bank this afternoon and mail the check tomorrow." "Please call me as soon as you've sent it," she instructed. "We'll need to enter the check information into our system to activate the protection protocol." After hanging up, Detective Collins was practically beaming. "Mrs. Wilkins, you're a natural at this. We now have a business name and mailing address." The officer with the laptop looked up. "The address exists, but it's a mail forwarding service. As for SSA Security Protocols, LLC, I'm checking business registrations now." "What happens next?" I asked. "We contact the Delaware authorities and set up surveillance on that mail drop. When someone picks up your envelope, we'll be watching." "So I'll actually send a check?" I asked, surprised. "A fake one," she clarified. "We'll create an official-looking document that appears to be a cashier's check but contains tracking devices in the envelope." I couldn't help but feel a thrill of excitement. What had started as simply a case of me being targeted was now turning into a multi-state investigation. "Director Collins seems to have disappeared," I noted with a smile. The real Detective Collins laughed. "I think I prefer my actual job to her fictional one." As the team packed up their equipment, Detective Collins turned to me with a serious expression. "Mrs. Wilkins, I have to admit I underestimated you when you first came in. You've been instrumental in this investigation." I smiled, thinking of all the times I'd been underestimated because of my age. "Detective, if teaching high school for 42 years taught me anything, it's that the most dangerous mistake you can make is underestimating someone based on appearances." She nodded in agreement. A lesson our scammers are about to learn the hard way. 3 days later, I sat in Detective Collins's office, sipping lukewarm coffee from a paper cup. The fake cashier's check had been delivered to the Delaware address the day before, and we were waiting for updates. "How are you holding up, Mrs. Wilkins?" Detective Collins asked. "Just fine," I assured her. "I haven't had this much excitement since the senior center took us to that casino in Atlantic City last year." She smiled. "Well, I hope this turns out better than gambling." "Oh, I did quite well at the slots," I informed her. "Frank always said I had lucky hands." Her phone rang, interrupting our conversation. "Collins," she answered, then listened intently. "When? Are you certain? Keep me posted."
She hung up and turned to me with excitement in her eyes. Someone just picked up the envelope. My heart raced. Did they catch them? Not yet, she said. The surveillance team is following the courier. Appears to be a regular pickup service. They're tracking where the packages go next. So this could lead to the actual scammers? I asked. Potentially, she nodded. These operations typically have multiple layers. The mail drop, the courier, perhaps another sorting location, and then finally the actual operators. We spent the next few hours waiting for updates, which came in sporadically. The courier had delivered packages to a business center in Philadelphia. From there, our envelope was sorted into a different batch and moved again. It's like following breadcrumbs, Detective Collins explained. Each step gets us closer. By late afternoon, we received the news we'd been waiting for. Our envelope had arrived at what appeared to be an actual office in a rundown building in North Philadelphia. FBI agents in the area were preparing to raid the location. Would you like to stay and hear the outcome? It might be several more hours. I wouldn't miss it for the world, I replied. She arranged for dinner to be brought in, and we continued our wait. It was nearly 9 p.m. when her phone rang again. Collins, she answered, then listened silently for several minutes. How many? What about computers? Yes, she's still here. She hung up and turned to me with excitement in her eyes. Someone just picked up the envelope. My heart raced. Did they catch them? Yes, she confirmed. His real name is Darren Miller, age 35. He has prior convictions for wire fraud and identity theft. And Director Collins? I asked with a smile. Melissa Jenkins, 29, also with a record of similar offenses. I leaned back in my chair, processing this information. The faceless voices on the phone now had names, ages, histories. They were real people who had made the conscious decision to prey on vulnerable seniors. I asked, what happens to them now? They'll face federal charges, she explained. With the evidence we've gathered and what was found at the scene, they're looking at significant prison time. Good, I said firmly. Perhaps they'll learn something during their stay. Detective Collins reached across her desk and squeezed my hand. Mrs. Wilkins, I can't overstate how instrumental you were in this investigation. Without your persistence and cooperation, we might never have tracked down this operation. I just did what needed to be done, I said simply. Too many people my age have lost their life savings to scammers like these. Well, thanks to you, there are 4 fewer scammers out there now. As I prepared to leave, Detective Collins walked me to the door. The FBI will want your testimony if this goes to trial. Would you be willing to testify? Absolutely, I said without hesitation. I'd be delighted to face Mr. Miller in court and show him exactly who he tried to scam. I have no doubt you'll make quite an impression on the jury, she smiled. When I got home that evening, I called Sarah to share the news. Grandma, that's amazing! You should be on one of those true crime shows. I laughed. I think I've had enough excitement for now, but I am rather proud of how it all turned out. You should be, she said earnestly. You didn't just protect yourself, you protected countless other seniors who might have been victims. After we hung up, I sat in my favorite armchair, the one Frank used to occupy during our evening discussions. I could almost hear him chuckling, saying, Ellie, you were always too stubborn for your own good. But this time, my stubbornness had served a greater purpose. I hadn't just caught a scammer, I'd proven that age doesn't diminish capability, wisdom, or determination. As I looked at the framed photo of Frank on the side table, I whispered, not bad for a supposedly vulnerable old lady, right? I could almost hear his reply, not bad at all, Ellie. Not bad at all. What none of us realized then was that this wasn't the end of the story. It was just the beginning of my unexpected new chapter as the scammer's worst nightmare.
6 months later, I stood at a podium in the community center, looking out at a sea of gray and white heads. The room was packed with seniors from across the county, all here for my presentation: how to spot and stop scammers. After the successful arrest of Darren Miller and his associates, Detective Collins had asked if I would be willing to share my experience with other seniors. What began as a small talk at the local library had grown into a regular series of workshops. The most important thing to remember, I told my attentive audience, is that legitimate government agencies will never ask you to pay with gift cards or Bitcoin. If someone requests these payment methods, it's a scam, period. Hands shot up around the room. So many questions, so many stories of near misses or, sadly, successful scams that had cost people their savings. "Mrs. Wilkins," called an elderly man in the third row, "what if they have your personal information? My social security number, my address?" "Excellent question," I replied. Unfortunately, with data breaches so common these days, scammers often have access to our personal information. That's why they sound so convincing. But remember, having your information doesn't make them legitimate. After the presentation, Detective Collins, who had been standing at the back of the room, approached me. "Another successful session," she said. "You're making a real difference, Eleanor." I had become Eleanor to her over the months, as our professional relationship had evolved into friendship. "I hope so," I said. "Every time I hear another story about someone losing their savings, it breaks my heart." "Well, you'll be happy to know that our friends in Philadelphia are facing serious consequences. Miller took a plea deal and is serving 7 years. Jenkins got 5. "Good," I said firmly, though no amount of time seems enough for stealing people's security and peace of mind. As we walked toward the parking lot, Detective Collins hesitated. "Eleanor, there's something I've been wanting to discuss with you." "That sounds serious," I remarked. "The FBI has been impressed with your work on these senior awareness programs. They're expanding their efforts to combat elder fraud and are looking for consultants, people who can help train agents on how to better communicate with senior victims and understand their perspectives." I stopped walking. "Are you saying what I think you're saying?" She smiled. "They've asked if you would be interested in a part-time consulting role. Paid, of course." I stood there, momentarily speechless. Me, a 78-year-old retired English teacher, consulting for the FBI? "I know it's unexpected," Detective Collins continued, "but your insight has been invaluable. You understand how these scammers operate, and more importantly, you know how to explain it to others." "I'll need to think about it," I said, though I already felt excitement building. It would certainly give me something to tell the Bridge Club about. "Take your time," she said, "but personally, I think you'd be perfect for it." That evening, as I considered the offer, I remembered something Frank used to say when we discussed retirement. "Ellie, don't ever let yourself become invisible. Too many older folks fade away because they think society has no use for them anymore." He had refused to fade away, volunteering at the Veterans Center until his health failed. And now, it seemed, I was following his example in my own way. I called Sarah to share the news. "Grandma, that's incredible," she exclaimed. "FBI consultant at 78? That has to be some kind of record." "I doubt that," I laughed.
But it is rather gratifying to be valued for my experience rather than dismissed because of my age. So you'll do it? She asked. I believe I will, I decided. It feels right somehow. Grandpa would be so proud, she said softly. Yes, I agreed, glancing at his photo. I think he would. 2 weeks later, I found myself at the FBI field office in the city, sitting across from Agent Keller, the coordinator for the Elder Fraud Initiative. Mrs. Wilkins, we're delighted to have you on board, he said. Your firsthand experience with these scammers gives you a perspective our agents simply don't have. I'm happy to help, I replied, though I must admit I never imagined I'd be working with the FBI at my age. Age brings wisdom, he said, and in this case, that's exactly what we need. My role began with reviewing training materials and offering suggestions to make them more effective for senior audiences, but it soon expanded to include speaking at agent training sessions and even participating in the development of new strategies to identify and combat evolving scam techniques. At one such meeting, I found myself in a conference room with 6 agents, all at least 40 years my junior. The problem, explained Agent Ramirez, is that these scammers adapt so quickly. As soon as we warn people about one approach, they develop a new one. That's because we're always playing defense, I pointed out. We warn people after the scams are already in operation. What do you suggest? Asked Agent Keller. Let's think like they do, I said. If I were going to develop a new scam targeting seniors today, what would it look like? What current events or concerns could I exploit? The room fell silent as everyone considered this approach. That's actually brilliant, Agent Ramirez finally said. Anticipate the scams before they happen. Exactly, I nodded, and then we can warn seniors in advance, not after people have already been victimized. This proactive approach became the cornerstone of a new prevention program. We began publishing scam forecasts that predicted and described likely upcoming scams based on current events, seasonal patterns, and emerging technologies. When the first of these forecasts accurately predicted a new Medicare card scam 3 weeks before it appeared, Agent Keller called me personally to share the news. Eleanor, you were right on the money, he said. We've already seen a 30% reduction in reported incidents because people recognized the scam from our warning. That's wonderful, I said, feeling a deep sense of satisfaction. How many potential victims do you think we saved? Conservatively, at least 100 in our region alone, and the national rollout of your forecast model starts next month. I sat down, suddenly overwhelmed by the impact of what had begun as my personal battle against one scammer. That night, I wrote in my journal, something I'd started doing again at Sarah's suggestion to document this unexpected chapter of my life. Frank always said that retirement should be the beginning of something, not the end. He was right, though neither of us could have imagined this particular beginning. Today, I learned that my work has helped protect hundreds of seniors from scammers, from victim to defender. Not a transformation I expected at 78, but perhaps that's the gift of aging, the surprise of discovering you still have something valuable to contribute, something no one else can offer in quite the same way. As I closed my journal, I remembered Mr. Stevens, Darren Miller, and his condescending tone when he thought I was just another confused old lady. I wonder if he knew what his attempt to scam me had led to, how it had set in motion a chain of events
that would ultimately protect thousands from people like him. I hoped he did. I hoped it kept him awake at night in his prison cell, knowing that his biggest mistake wasn't targeting a senior citizen. It was targeting this senior citizen.
1 year later, I stood at the back of a crowded courtroom, watching as the judge entered to deliver his verdict in the case against Darren Miller's supervisor, the man who had orchestrated the entire scam operation. After Miller's arrest, the investigation had continued, working its way up the chain to the leader of the organization. I had testified earlier in the week, describing in detail my interactions with Miller and how I had worked with the police to gather evidence. The defense attorney had tried to discredit me, suggesting that, at my age, my memory couldn't be reliable. "Mrs. Wilkins," he had asked with poorly disguised condescension, "you expect the court to believe that at 79 years old you recall these conversations in such detail?" I had smiled calmly. "Counselor, I taught Macbeth to high school seniors for 42 years. I can still recite all 5 acts from memory. Would you like a demonstration?" The courtroom had erupted in laughter, and the attorney had quickly moved on. Now, as the judge prepared to announce his decision, I felt Detective Collins, now simply Karen to me, squeeze my hand. "Nervous?" she whispered. "Not particularly," I replied. The evidence was overwhelming. The judge's gavel came down, silencing the room. "In the case of the United States versus James Harmon, on all 18 counts of wire fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy, this court finds the defendant guilty." A collective exhale seemed to pass through the room. Harmon, a man in his 50s with expensive clothes and an arrogant demeanor, showed no reaction beyond a slight tightening of his jaw. As we left the courthouse, reporters crowded around, shouting questions. Most were directed at the prosecutors, but one young woman approached me. "Mrs. Wilkins, Dana Chen from the Tribune. Your work has been credited with helping to bring down one of the largest elder fraud operations in the state. How does that feel?" I considered the question. "It feels like justice," I finally said, "not just for me, but for every senior who has been targeted, dismissed, or underestimated." What would you say to other seniors who might be afraid of becoming victims? I'd tell them that knowledge is power. Learn the warning signs, trust your instincts, and remember that your years of experience give you wisdom that these scammers don't expect. Sometimes being underestimated is actually your greatest advantage. Back home that evening, I hosted a small gathering. Karen, Sarah and her husband, and a few friends from my senior awareness group. We celebrated the verdict with sparkling cider and my apple pie. "To Eleanor," Karen raised her glass, "the scammer's worst nightmare." Everyone laughed and clinked glasses. After they had gone, I sat in the quiet of my living room, reflecting on the journey of the past 18 months. The FBI consulting work had expanded to include advising on a national public awareness campaign. My scam forecasts had become a regular feature in seniors' newsletters across the country. And next month, I would be speaking at a congressional hearing on elder fraud prevention. My phone chimed with a text from Sarah. "Just saw you on the 11 o'clock news. You're famous, Grandma. So proud of you. Love you." I smiled and texted back. "Fame at 79? Who would have thought? Love you too." As I prepared for bed, I paused at Frank's photo, as I did every night. "Well, Frank, I'm certainly not invisible, am I?" I could almost hear his warm chuckle and his voice saying, "Not even close, Ellie, not even close." The next morning, I woke to the sound of my phone ringing. It was Karen. "Eleanor, have you seen the news?" "I just woke up," I said, glancing at the clock. It was barely 7 a.m. "Turn on Channel 5, she said urgently. I fumbled for the remote and switched on the television. There was Harmon's face on the screen, alongside the breaking news banner, "Elder Fraud Kingpin Commits Suicide in Holding Cell."
I sank into my chair, stunned. The reporter was explaining that Harmon had been found unresponsive in his cell at 5 a.m., having apparently used bed sheets to hang himself. "Are you all right?" Karen asked through the phone. "Yes," I said, slowly, "just surprised." "He was facing up to 30 years, she said. "Some people can't handle the consequences of their actions." After hanging up, I sat there watching the continued coverage. They showed a picture of me leaving the courthouse, identifying me as the grandmother who helped bring down the fraud operation. It was a strange feeling. I had wanted justice, not death. Yet I couldn't summon much sympathy for a man who had orchestrated the systematic targeting of vulnerable seniors. Later that day, I received a call from Agent Keller. "Eleanor, in light of recent events, we wanted to update you on something significant. Harmon's organization wasn't just operating in our region. It was national, possibly international. His computers are yielding information that could help us identify and shut down similar operations across the country. So, even in death, he's helping to dismantle what he built," I observed. "Exactly," Agent Keller confirmed. "And it's all because you refused to be a victim." That weekend, I hosted my regular bridge club meeting. As we played, Martha, who had lost $5,000 to a grandparent scam the previous year, brought up the news about Harmon. "I know we're supposed to feel bad when someone takes their own life, but I just keep thinking about how many lives he ruined." "It's complicated," I acknowledged. "We can recognize the tragedy of any death while also acknowledging the harm he caused." "Thanks to you, he won't harm anyone else," said Doris, my partner of 15 years. "You know, Eleanor, you've inspired me. I've started volunteering at that cybersecurity class at the senior center." "Good for you," I said, genuinely pleased. "The more of us who get involved, the safer we all become." As I dealt the next hand, I reflected on how this chapter of my life had rippled outward, affecting not just me, but my friends, my community, and even national policy. From a single scam call to congressional testimony, it was a journey I could never have anticipated. Later that evening, I received an email from a woman named Patricia in Florida. "Dear Mrs. Wilkins, I saw you on the news. Last month, I received a call exactly like the one you described in your scam forecast. Because of your warning, I recognized it immediately and reported it. The police told me I was the 5th person that day to report the same scam, but the first who hadn't fallen for it. I'm 84 and live alone since my Henry passed. Without your warning, I might have lost everything. Thank you for fighting for people like me. With gratitude, Patricia." I printed the email and added it to a folder I'd been keeping. Messages from seniors across the country who had avoided scams because of our awareness campaign. The folder was getting quite thick. As I prepared for bed, I thought about Darren Miller, who would still be in prison for several more years. I wondered if he ever reflected on his choice of targets that day, how his decision to call an easy mark had backfired so spectacularly. I hoped that somewhere in his cell he had learned the lesson that I had taught generations of students. Appearances can be deceiving, wisdom comes in many forms, and underestimating someone based on their age might just be the biggest mistake you ever make. And as for me, at 79, I had discovered a new purpose, a new passion, and a new chapter in a life I had thought was winding down. It wasn't the retirement Frank and I had planned, but I like to think he would approve. Because in the end, I hadn't just caught a scammer. I had found a way to transform a single act of attempted victimization into a movement that was helping thousands. Not bad for a supposedly vulnerable old lady. Not bad at all.